Thank you all for joining tonight's program with Inforum at the Commonwealth Club. I'm Michael McAfee, president of PolicyLink, and I'm really excited about this evening. I've known Mayor Tubbs for several years, and he is a real scholar and a gentleman. And he represents what I believe is abundant in many of our communities that we have stigmatized, written off, and have forgotten that possibility exists in. So I really ask that you just pay attention to his wisdom, his intellect, what's in his heart tonight. And I want you to think about, more importantly, when you look at him, the thousands and thousands of folks in rural America, in urban communities, and in tribal communities that need us to create opportunity for them to be on a platform like this. He's the embodiment of what this nation has to offer. And I hope you get that tonight out of our conversation. I've got a bunch of questions for you, Mayor, starting with how you grew up, your professional career, and all that. But I really wanted to start with what's in your heart? You have, you heard me.
That's a loaded question.
Yeah, what's in your heart? You have been on a phenomenal rise, and you're an amazing leader. And I find it's important to know what leaders are made of and what they care about. And now that you have this gift to be mayor of Stockton and the platform that you have, what's in your heart that's burning to get out?
Man, woo. Let's start there. No. Well, first, thank you for the kind introduction, and thank you for the opportunity, Commonwealth Club. And I think your intro gets to it, but I know that I've been really blessed. So the biggest thing in my heart is gratitude, but also a sense of this opportunity is not given to many, much less many 27-year-old black kids in America whose fathers have been incarcerated and who grew up in poverty. So I think there's always a nagging sense of almost, I love the Hamilton soundtrack. So this idea of not throwing away my shot and understanding this opportunity has been given for a reason. But I also think that for me, that the status quo is just so unacceptable. Like that's where the risk is, that's where the pain is, that's where the controversy should be in my mind. So that's what really drives the work. But it also just comes down just from upbringing. The stuff we're doing around poverty or violence reduction comes from reading and researching and talking to folks, but it also comes from just knowing the folks I grew up with who sometimes worked harder than anyone I've ever met, but still couldn't pay bills. Or friends of mine who were just as smart, more athletic in some cases, not all cases, but more athletic, but through to individual choices, but also the environment they grew up in have radically different outcomes than me. So to answer your question, I think what's in my heart is this understanding that we all, it sounds really basic, but I do truly believe that all human beings have inherent God-given worth and value, just as a baseline. And then number two, I think we spend a lot of time talking about agency, but I'm more interested in structure because I can't control the choices people make, but I can help shape the environment in which those choices are made through policy. And that's really what's in my heart, doing all I can to show folks that the majority of people are rational actors if given normal experiences to live in.
Thank you. Thank you. So you were sharing with me a little bit about some of the things in your background as you were growing up. I want to understand, what was it like growing up in Stockton? And I want you to then connect it to, how did you get your shot?
Oh, man. How to take it? No. Well, it's funny because growing up, I didn't realize I grew up, quote unquote, bad or hard Scrabble till I went to Stanford, which is like another extreme. But I always thought we were middle class, literally. I thought we were government cheese, but we were middle class. We weren't poor. So my mom, she had me when she was a teenager. She was 16 when she was pregnant. And my father's been incarcerated for 25 out of 27 years I've been alive. So growing up was rough, but I think a lot of things I fight for now, I do because I had. So we didn't have a lot of money, but we had a strong social support network from our church, from great community-based organizations and mentors, from things like rec league basketball and AAU basketball and coaches and things like that provided a real safety net. There's also a lot of these programs that come under attack. So being on WIC for the first 7 years of my life made sure I had access to like milk and cheese and things baby and kids need. Going to magnet programs in public schools. I was in the IB program from 7th to 12th grade. Kind of the church institution and just these amazing, my mother, my grandmother, and aunt formed a real kind of wall and a shield from a lot of harsh realities. So it wasn't until I got to college and I realized that, whoa, your mom makes $38,000, you're poor. Like you guys, you're actually you're not middle class, no matter what you say. But I had no idea. I was so offended. I said, no, I'm not. I'm middle class. I was like, no, look at the data, look at the median income. And then I went. So funny story. So I went home for Christmas break and told my cousin that. She like started, and she's like, no, that's not true. And I was like, yes, it is. She started crying. And it was a big family fight. But I don't know what the question was, but. I think
you're telling the story about how you grew up, and then I just wanted you to connect it to how did you get that shot to get to Stanford and get out?
Well, it was a lot of like ordinary people. There was a woman at my church who was a doctor, whose kids had all graduated and went to like MIT and the Naval Academy in Stanford, and she would just drop off bags of books to me every week. And so by the time I was like 10, 11 years old, I had read like almost all of Charles Dickens, Madeline L'Engle, like all these books I probably wouldn't have access to, and she just gave me those books. So folks, little stuff like that. My mom, she was very brilliant in that she wasn't able to go to college, but she knew education was the way out. So I remember she would talk to her manager or her manager's manager and find out where they sent their kids to school. And that's how I went to Lakeside Christian School for elementary school. And that's how she found out about the IB program. I'll never forget, it was 7th grade. And we were figuring out where I was going to go to school next. And she said, well, my boss's son is in this program and he's struggling. But I think you could do it. Let's do it. You know, we're competitive. Let's go. And that's how we found out about the IB program. So I think it's my mom being very savvy in figuring out, okay, well, I want my son to be in a position where my boss's boss is, so that my boss may have information I don't have. So it was that, but it was also strong community supports and safety nets. Like, I played basketball year-round, and little things like the coach taking me to Froyo, or the coach taking me to his beautiful house that was 2 stories with a pool, and he owned a construction company, and he would show me how he made profit and loss statements and how he decided to hire people, and just little things like that. And then exposure. So in high school, I was able to spend summers at USC and at the Wharton School and just get a sense of that the world is big and that there is opportunity. And it was also just being really infused with this idea that life isn't fair, that our society is structured in ways that predicts outcomes for people, and all that's true, but that's also not destiny. So even though you might have to work twice as hard or 3 times as hard, if you want to get to a certain place, that's what you have to do. And again, my mom was very adamant about drilling that in, like, no, it's not fair. Like, no, they have people that can help them with their homework. I can't, but you can do it, and you need to figure out how. And I think that those values, in addition to those small community inputs, kind of put me in a position where I was able to go to college.
Perfect. And share the story about, you thought you were going to go to the East Coast to go to college. And you
Oh,
ended up at
yeah. So growing up, partly because, backtracking a little bit, so in Stockton, we moved around a lot, but now as mayor, I find it really interesting that I lived in 4 to 5 focus areas for the city. So 4 of the areas in the city that not just struggle with high rates of crime, but I say they're high in bad outcomes, but low in positive outcomes. So high in things like crime and unemployment, but also low in things like grocery stores and safe places to play and things we probably take for granted. So growing up that way, the idea was that to be successful, you had to leave Stockton. So that was the goal and that was the orientation. So the Christmas before college admissions, I told my family to buy me nothing but sweaters and pea coats because I wanted to, seriously, I wanted to look the part. I said I want that Old Navy pea coat so I could wear it in the Ivy League, and then I wanted the nice sweaters with not hoodies all the time, but I had it all planned out. So they indulged me because I knew where I was going to be in college somehow. So they indulged me and bought me nothing but sweaters. So then I'm packing. Again, money was hard, but I couldn't take them back because it was already May, right? It's past the 30 days. So when I was packing for Stanford, I had a lot of sweaters. So in the winter, I was the freshest guy on campus. I had a different sweater every morning.
Yeah. And why did you choose Stanford?
It's a good question. it was a weird moment. I think it was a really divine thing, honestly, because it was a weird moment of like 17-year-old wisdom. I was visiting Columbia in New York, and it was raining, and I'm in the middle, and I didn't realize the campus was right in the middle of the city. And I knew me, and I said, if I go here, I might not be in class. Like, C doesn't sleep, I don't sleep. This is a perfect move. So I was actually really excited. Like, I'm going to be at Columbia. But then I was talking to a lot of the students that were there, and I was asking where they were from. And they were all from different cities, but they're all an hour and 30 minutes away. Like, everyone was an hour, 30 minutes, or 2 hours away. And I was like, Stanford's an hour and a half away. And then I went home, and I said, I actually would like Columbia more socially, but I think I'll be a better student at Stanford because there's nothing to do in Palo Alto.
That is what it is, right?
I was in Columbia, there's no way I'd be running for mayor of Stockton.
Right.
I was going to be Diddy. I was going to work for Diddy or be Diddy. That was going to be the...
Right. And what made you decide to finish Stanford and go back to Stockton?
So it's funny. So when I first got there, it was 2008, and that's when President Obama was running. So everybody wanted to be a community organizer. So I was going to be a community organizer. But then in 2009, he started getting gray hair, so I said, let me try Google. Seriously, so I worked at Google, and I said, I like this. It's not evil. You're still helping the world, but you get nap pods and food. I thought it was made for me. And then my junior year, I ended up interning in the White House. And my job was in intergovernmental affairs. So I was working, it's funny looking backwards, it makes so much sense. But at the time, I was like 20 years old. I didn't even want that. I wanted to be in policy council. I didn't want to be talking to mayors and councils. So I spent every day Googling mayors and council members. I was like, this is here we go. And they would come in, and I'd take them on tours and stuff. And it was, they're cool people. And I saw that, because that's when like Cory Booker, Senator Booker, was still mayor and others. So I was like, oh my gosh, like these people are doing amazing things for 300,000 people. And the timing was interesting because at the same time the Tea Party was rising. So there was so much stalemate at the federal level. So all the hope of the 2008 campaign, I was like, oh, is it possible to make change in government? But then every day I would meet mayors and council members that were doing just incredible things. So I said, oh, wow, maybe I'll donate to folks in Stockton to run because my family's still going to be there. And I want them to have the same level of leadership I'm seeing. And then around the same time, on Halloween of 2010, one of my cousins was murdered at a house party in Stockton. And it was heartbreaking for a couple of reasons. The first reason was that that's like someone I grew up with, a family member. But the second was realizing that that was not a foreign narrative, that for many young people, especially in certain neighborhoods, that was almost a coming of age experience. Like, yeah. We move on. So going back to the funeral, kind of dealing with the pain, I resolved I would go back to Stockton one day. And then the next year, we had another year of record homicides, so back-to-back years. And at that point, we were higher per capita than Chicago and Afghanistan. And so much of the conversation in the city at that time was about kind of bankruptcy. And the internal argument I was having was, well, I mean, there's a bankruptcy in terms of finances, but there's also a moral bankruptcy if for the past 28 years, 92% of all homicides have been young men of color, and there's no one's upset. There's no outrage. There's not saying this is unacceptable. Who are we as a community? So then I decided to run, but the hard part was convincing my mom.
That you would run?
Oh, that was coming back. She said, for what? And then I said, well, I feel a real calling to come back. And she said, well, let's think about this. And so she's like, she said, you don't owe anyone anything. You understand that, right? Like, you worked hard. Like, you go enjoy your life.
Yes.
And that didn't work. And she said, well, the plan for 17 years, all those sacrifices was for you to get this out. Like, you're supposed to make it big. But then finally she came around because I told her, well, Mom, the worst thing that can happen is what? She says, you lose. I said, I lose, and guess what? I'll still have 2 Stanford degrees and have a great interview answer. If they say, tell us about the time you took a risk, I could talk about when I ran for... So after that, she was sold. But then it's funny, so then in 2016, we had did some good things on council. We like open health clinics, open banks, so we were moving. She thought that I had to do good thing over with. So she said, so are you gonna run again? I was like, yeah, Mom, we gotta continue this work. She's like, what? No, like you spent 4 years, look at all the stuff you did, you can leave now. So now she's looking at 2020 as the next time she could try to convince me to do something else.
Yeah. Now you ran really young, so how did you not fall in the trap of so many that say, oh, I'm too young, or they hear people say, wait your turn, and so that gets in their head and they don't choose to do it?
Yeah, you know how they say your greatest strength could also be your greatest weakness? It's so true. So I wouldn't say I'm stubborn. I would say if I have a vision, I'm going to go full throttle to execute the vision. So, and I think for me, it was like, well, you guys, we're at rock bottom. And clearly what's been happening is not working. And nothing will change if we don't do something. And I'm still working on this now as being in office, but I get really frustrated with Monday morning quarterbacks. Like I like to be, quote Hamilton again, I like to be in the room where it happens. I don't want to second guess. I don't want to I want to know, like when this decision was made, what was everyone talking about and feeling and what were the trade-offs they had? Because it calms me down. It makes me, even though I don't agree, at least I understand what's happening. So I think that was part of it. But I think more than anything it was being consumed with like a sense of purpose. Like it wasn't about an office. It wasn't about an election, but it was really about this is what I really felt at this time. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. And I think that level of conviction made all the other stuff kind of roll off. Because there was a lot of that, like wait your turn. Actually, this seat's for somebody else who's going to run in 2016. You're not old enough. There's no way you'll win. Like on one end, and then for some of my mentors and people, it's like, why would you go back now? This is like the worst time to go back. Like your job's going to be saying no and budget austerity for 4 years. Like why would you? It makes no sense politically for you to go back at the worst time. But it was just a really real North Star. Like no. This was I felt really strongly. This is what I'm supposed to do.
Okay. You know, I often talk about. Sometimes in my role, it's hard for me because I carry the anger and the contempt for being able to get out, while so many of my family members didn't. And it's that anger that helps me be creative and push forward. Do you have any anger? And if you do, how do you channel it?
Yeah. I didn't get out though. I'm like in the belly now. I'm deep in.
Yeah, you were deep.
Sometimes I wish. No, I'm just, no. No, I think I harken back to what I started with. I smile and I laugh, but I think it's unacceptable how the vast majority of people have to live in this country, in this world. I get really upset at I get really upset at the trauma the young people I used to teach had to go through just to come to class. I was like, what? I get really upset with things we should have been done with 100 years ago. In terms, like the very simple premise that everyone has equal worth and value. The fact that we have to like fight and protest for that really upsets me. I'm mostly upset in that there's so many brilliant, like Stanford, San Francisco, Silicon Valley does not have the monopoly on talent.
That's right.
And I tell people all the time that I truly know that talent and intellect are actually universal, but our opportunities and resources oftentimes aren't. And there's definitely my brilliant friends who work very hard. But I'm like, yeah, but there's people that work very hard that didn't have the same level of choices to choose from who have different outcomes. And so that gets me upset. And I'm also upset because I think there's a spiritual dimension to this too. If we're all like God's children, how could we be okay with folks not being able to reach their full potential or living in neighborhoods we wouldn't even want to walk through? Like that really makes me upset as well. But I'm also a very happy guy. I smile and laugh. Yeah.
I've watched it. So now that you're mayor, you get a chance to implement a lot of things that can help the folks that you've been talking about and the things that you don't like. Tell us a little bit about the package of things that you're rolling out and why, like universal basic income, Stockton Scholars, things like that, advanced peace.
Well, because I know San Francisco, y'all like theory of changes. So the theory of change that we're working on is the best investment we can make isn't in our infrastructure necessarily or in buildings, but really investing in people and really doing all we can to harness the human capital of the folks in Stockton, which is a difficult job to do from the mayor's position. So that's what we're trying to do. But I tell people all the time, it's not just the easy people or the 4.5 students we should invest in, but I'm worried about those 0.5 students, those 1.5s and 2.0s, especially because they probably won't be the ones that stay with us. So I want to make sure they have every opportunity they need to be successful. So that is from that premise, we decided to launch the basic income thing, which everyone's excited about. There's a group called the Economic Security Project. They were looking for a city to partner with, and it was really interesting for me because in college I remember reading Where Do We Go From Here? Chaos or Community, and Dr. King was calling for a federal work guarantee and or a basic income, and I was always in my like moleskin. I was like, what happened to this idea? Like, where's this going to be in 50 years? You know, because you know you're deep in college, so you have all these ideas. So when I was in a conversation with them, and I had instructed my team of policy fellows to research the craziest, because we're 25% in poverty. So I said, research the craziest policy intervention on poverty. Not that we're going to do it. I just want to know just for my own arsenal. But they came back with basic income. And I said, really? People still? I said, that's still a thing, okay. And then the next week, literally, as the Conference of the Economic Security Project, they were talking. They said, you know what? We're looking for a city to pilot universal basic income. And I have a task force. Because I had like 3 people research. So we had memos and stuff. And we spent the next 2 months co-creating and reading. But what was interesting for me is that so much of the frame, for not necessarily for them, but for other people, was this idea of automation and the scary future. And Mark Zuckerberg giving a speech at Harvard. But for me, it's really about the here and now. And I just read the other day that 1 in 2 Californians can afford one $400 emergency. Or the fact that San Francisco, but throughout the state, there's just a housing crisis, and people who are working are homeless. Like working poor is an issue as a term. Like it creates dissonance for me. But working and homeless, like that's even a whole nother dimension of unacceptableness. So it's from that I said, you know what, you guys, let's pilot it, let's try it, and understanding that 100 families for 18 months or 12 months isn't 300,000 people, but it's also not zero. And I think it's a very special time for the city to be kind of in the middle of a conversation about what does the economic future look like for Americans and what floor or safety nets do we need. And I think it's also been interesting because a lot of people like it should replace the existing social safety net. And I'm not there either. I think it should enhance. I think the social safety net we had, it isn't completely broken. It needs some enhancement. So that's the basic income thing. But I was really shocked by the level of like hatred and vitriol for someone else's money. So at first I was like, you're mad that someone's going to give us $1 million to help 100 people? Like what? How? But then I realized we have a very interesting relationship with poverty, poor, and deserving in this country. So I feel really blessed that at least I could trust myself and my team to be very nuanced in how we tell the story. Because the funny thing is, when every debate we've had or conversation we had about basic income is this idea of you're rewarding laziness and you're rewarding you're rewarding laziness, the inherent dignity of work. But the term is universal, meaning you and me. So I'm like, you are just as likely to get it as someone who is or is not working.
So how are you dealing with creating a new narrative around the deserving?
Yeah, I think it's been a lot doing this. It's been very bold and unapologetic of saying like, no, we believe in the inherent dignity of all humans, and that there's a variety of reasons why people might not work. Like I remember I got in a debate with someone about the idea of the inherent dignity of work, but I don't find anything inherently dignified about working 14 hours, seeing your family for 5 hours, and still not being able to pay your bills. Like that's frustrating. That's not dignified. That would make me upset, right?
Yeah.
So that's been really interesting, and then all these like there's a bunch of trolls now. Like seriously, because I was in Trump's feed. Like last week, I was ready to. I had a good comeback. So that's that. And then the
scholarship.
Well, think about that. If you were on Trump's feed, you would be ready to respond, right? Because you don't know. You know he pops off. So, so in that same vein, the Stockton Scholars Initiative comes from this, and School Board Trustee Lunta is here, who's been doing a lot of the work on that. But it comes from teaching and being a counselor, and that there's all these invisible blocks because the signals from sometimes self-signals, sometimes signals from society or community that for a lot of our kids, they think not just college, but anything after high school, there's nothing there. So it's really about exposing children to like there is opportunity, but it's also exposing them to expectation. Like we expect that when you graduate, you'll do something. whether it's trade school, cosmetology school, whether it's a two-year community college, whereas a 4-year, we expect you and we also got you. You're not here by yourself. There's guarantee you don't have to do nothing but do what you're supposed to do. Because I think oftentimes we tell folks if you do everything right, and you might be lucky, do everything right and get a full ride to Stanford, but that story is so incredible because it doesn't happen that often.
Right.
So how do we make sure that if people do everything right, there's at least something there for them? So really excited. Even the conversations, and especially in this conversation about school reform, because I think oftentimes people want to reform with sticks all the time, but it's been so much easier to get the whole community to the table about how do you make sure our kids are ready to receive this gift. Now the district's moving through A through G for all. It's a conversation we've been trying to have for like 4 years and 2 months. We're like, okay, and it's garnering energy. We have counselors and teachers looking at their students, and as all of them, not just the third are in A through G classes, not just the ones that are in IB, not just the ones that do their homework at lunch, but all of them have the potential to do something. So it's been, and seeing also the community respond and saying, well, how do you make sure every school district gets this? So that's probably the thing I'm going to be the proudest of, because that will last for at least a decade. And I know from my own personal story, just if it wasn't for opportunity and going to college, I would not be where I am today. So it's a way to pay it back and forward. And then advanced peace. So my top motivation for even running for office was because of gun violence and homicides. So it's something that's deeply personal, obsessed with, spend a lot of time researching, reading, answering questions, doing ride-alongs, talking to folks, families, parents, mothers, young men themselves who have been impacted by gun violence, et cetera. And we've had a couple of strategies that are in the city that like ceasefire were good, really supportive. But I also realize that Stockton's a big city, and this has been a generational problem. So the analogy I use is that even the Warriors add players in the off season, and we not the Warriors. So we need to add more as much as we can to build a championship team. But really, I like the frame of advanced peace, because I think the cash for criminals is what gets everyone focused and riled up. But it's really the cognitive behavioral therapy. It's really the transformative travel. It's really the extensive case management, 7 days a week. It's really those inputs that lead to the investment. So,
and is the angle that you are targeting the folks who are the greatest probability of creating violent crime?
Yeah, so the idea is that there's a less than 1% of our population that are known to be driving our violent crime rates. They're either currently actively carrying firearms in many cases, or will be based on social networks, because the way violence works in urban communities is it's a disease, and it's embedded in social networks. So everyone's not at risk. It's a very small group of people who live in certain neighborhoods, have certain kind of kinship and familial ties. So the idea is that since we have this information, let's do everything we can, and understanding that we're not going to help everyone.
Right.
But my response has continued to be, I don't know any intervention that works for everyone. And we could just help one. If there's one less homicide, that's at least $500,000 according to Mother Jones in terms of cost between the city and county, and that's one. So I'm really, really excited, because I think oftentimes communities like Stockton, and especially people like those guys, are written off as they're not redeemable. But some of the most amazing stories in history and in our country come from folks who were literally some of the greatest purveyors of harm to communities. I think we owe people at least the opportunity, if they want to change, because jails ain't going nowhere. The cops will still do their job. We're not getting rid of all the things, but we're just adding an opportunity for folks who want it.
Perfect. Thank you. So I didn't tell the mayor this, but I wanted to talk to the mayor about love for a moment.
It is February.
And you got this ring on your finger. The mayor just got married. So I want to understand how that's added a new dimension to your leadership.
That's a good question. Wow. Yeah. Did she tweet you that? That's an excellent question. So, but because we've been dating since before I ran for city council, so marriage is definitely different. But she's been there
on the journey.
She's been knocking on doors, getting chased by dogs. And then she's fluent in Spanish, so she's the secret weapon that we're going. And people try like they don't speak, they don't want to engage, and she'll start speaking Spanish, and they're like, oh yeah, we vote for him. So I think she, believe it or not, she's like more radical than me in many respects. So she's always pushing me.
Yeah.
And I'm like, babe, we already get in trouble. Like, we should just chill out for a month. Let's just kiss some babies, take some selfies. She's like, no, we're here. Like, she pushes.
Yeah.
Which I appreciate. Sometimes I'm like, well, I don't tell you to do your job. Don't tell me how to do mine.
Right.
So that she's helpful in that way. But I think she's also incredibly empathetic. So especially in terms of seeing how hard I work and how I take things home, she's always asking about staff. Like, stop texting them. Like, why are you emailing them? Like, they're fine. Let them. You want to be up all night and send emails? Send them to yourself. Leave them alone. So I don't listen, but I hear her. You know, it makes sense. I'm sitting there. I'm getting it. So she's helpful with that. But she also has been really great and let me know that it's not all there is. That being mayor and loving your city is important, but it's also important to love your family. It's also important to create space where you can just think and be and feel and not. That it's okay. So I think she's allowed me to be more self-indulgent with time. Like, put your phone. Her favorite thing is like, this world has been this way for a while. It's going to take a while for us to fix it. So this dinner is not going to, like, you not focusing on dinner because you're trying to fix a problem. It's not actually going to fix the problem. Mm-hmm. I'd be like, all right, you're right. And I put my phone down. So she's been very letting me understand there's more to life, that this is important and you prioritize it, but you can't make it all-consuming in everything, because then the other stuff you care about might crumble.
That's right. Thank you for sharing that.
Okay.
Thank you. So I want to go back to your current position as mayor. What's been some of the biggest assumptions that have been challenged, your assumptions that you went into this job with that have been challenged?
I think the biggest assumption was, so we win the election with 71% of the vote. Mm-hmm. So I'm like, oh, we're ready. And I realized that even if my biggest assumption was that even though a status quo may not be working, for whatever reason, I'm sure some of the psychologists out here could probably put the theory around this, but folks don't like change, even if they want change, right? And it's like, whoa, okay, well, let's figure this out. So I think at first I went in thinking, okay, it's important to get consensus and buy-in, which it is. But I thought, okay, if people are a little bit too upset, let's just wait and hold off. But then I realized about a month in, if we did that, we'd just do nothing. Otherwise, I'm not here to do nothing. So we're gonna do something while we're in here. So that's been the biggest assumption. And I think it's not because there's anything bad. I think it's like the who moved my cheese, but it's just a human thing. Like, even if it's not working, at least there's a pattern around it. There's some comfort around it. There's a sense of control around it. Like, I know how to operate and move this, especially with large, like, bureaucratic organizations like city governments. The other big assumption I've challenged is that oftentimes the biggest role of leader is not necessarily doing. It's like just saying the conditions where doing can happen. So I just feel like being in the room or asking the question or saying something publicly, it garners a lot of action and activity. So I've learned to be a lot more careful and not share everything I think as soon as I think it. Everyone's laughing. I'm more mature than your president. Like so that, but also, I'll also. I'm really trying to get that tweet, y'all. No, I'm joking. But I would also say that the other assumption I've challenged is that, especially given all the rancor nationally, there's been folks or people or groups I walk into, I'm like, this might not go as well. And it's been the exact opposite. So I've realized that, it sounds really corny, but it's, at least in Stockton, it's really true that there are differences, but at least in terms of local government, folks fundamentally want the same thing, even if they disagree on how to get there. And that's been something that's been challenged, but in a good way, because there's rooms I've walked into and they're like the biggest supporters and like, let's do this, even though on paper, or if you look at the Facebook algorithm, they say we're on completely different sides. So that's been an assumption as well. So I'm hopeful in that it's not all rainbows and unicorns for sure, but that there are the majority of people want better, believe in the inherent worth of everyone, and it's the job of leadership to kind of guide discussions and push us there, even if it's a little bit difficult and could be a little bit bruising at times.
Got it. Youngest mayor, first African American mayor, right? Are you aware of your power?
Let's talk about it. Like, I don't. That's a good question. I guess not. I don't feel like we're not a strong mayor city, so for everything, I have to get 4 people to agree with me. For the things everyone cares about, I don't control, whether it's the school district or county services. So I feel the influence. I feel that by building relationships and going deep with people, we're able to move and align in ways that push forward. But I don't feel like Willie Brown. Like, I don't feel tired. I feel tired.
You feel tired?
Yeah, some days I feel tired.
Yeah.
But I also feel like we're moving. I feel like we're on the cusp of something, that we're close. Like, we're turning a page, but I think in the next 48 years, we could be a really special, or continue to be a special story. So that's what I feel.
But are you shying away from it? Because you've been leading and stepping into your power all along this journey. Now you're here.
Yeah. Well, I guess I probably should have answered this with a good tweet, but I think the power I feel is embedded in the relationships I've been able to build.
Okay.
So it's not power in and of like myself, but it's power for being part of rooted in community-based organizations and mentors and grandmothers on the block and philanthropic partners and just knowing that there's a team that I could count on to go. So I do feel that. I feel like want something, if something's good and it's aligned with values, if we want to make it happen, I do feel like it may take longer than I want it to take, but we can make it happen. I'm very cognizant of that. And I'm like, no, it's going to happen. We will figure out a way to get there because this is good. So I feel that, but I think it's more diffuse in terms of relationships.
That's right.
In me.
You've referenced our political climate a couple of times, and what do you think this democracy needs to be strong right now, especially from its elected leaders?
Yeah, well, I've said this like 4 times, but I truly believe this, and I think because some things are just this simple, that number one, we have to really reckon with the fact, do we think all human beings have equal worth or not? So I think starting policy conversations from there is a great first step. Because I do think if this election in the past year and a half has taught us anything, is that white supremacy is not an idea that's in the past. It's not something that's in the history book. It's something that's living and breathing, and it's killing people. And killing really the soul of our nation, in my opinion. But as a democracy, we have to wrestle with not just that legacy, but its contemporary form, and stay very clearly, this is not who we are as a people. This is not the best of us, and we could do better. Number 2, I think especially in this current climate, I back to being angry. I get really angry with this whole false equivalency thing. Like, some things are good and some things are bad, and there's like thousands of years of moral codes from across cultures that kind of ground that. So it's not even about someone being some authority, it's been part of the social contract for a while. And I think I get very terrified when we're having when we're making things equally right. Like, there's some things, there's some gray areas, but there also has to be some like black and white. And
an example you're talking about.
I keep harking back to the same thing, but I think even regardless of the loss of life, like someone being murdered, so today is the end of Trayvon Martin's birthday. He would have been 23 today. And the fact that there was a debate about whether a kid, I don't care if he was wearing nothing, but he had a hoodie on, and whether he's able to get Skittles and iced tea in his daddy's neighborhood where his dad pays taxes and has a mortgage. And whether that should end in death, and if it's justifiable that he was killed. Like, that's lunacy to me. And I think oftentimes there's this impulse to elevate. Like there's some very fine people in Charlottesville. No, everyone in Tiki Church was not fine. That's why they had Tiki Churches in the summer. That's weird. Like the whole thing was weird. So I think that, and then the last thing, and I learned this from Marian Wright Elderman, and she was, it was in 2013, and it was after the Tamir Rice situation, and we were talking, and I was like, man, I don't know. And she said, you've been doing this for 2 years. I've been doing this for 50 plus. But then she said, every gain in this country has happened because there's a struggle, that nothing just happens. Like no one just wakes up and says, okay, these are rights that people should have. That always has to be organized. There's a fight. There's a push. There's some conflict. But from that conflict can come progress and change. So she was telling me to lean into that. Like, no, you don't. Things aren't just going to happen. That sometimes you have to make them happen with folks, and sometimes it's not going to be easy, and sometimes there's going to be conflict. And that's the last thing. Conflict is not bad. I think oftentimes people are so, and maybe I'm probably at another extreme where I think conflict is really healthy. So like we disagree, let's disagree, and let's talk about why we disagree, and let's move on. Or we have the vote, so let's disagree, but we see you tomorrow, like the meeting's over. But I think there's an aversion to conflict, which makes us stay in silos or not want to talk and not want to really debate and argue. But I think some of the best ideas, some of the best growth, some of the best learning, some of the biggest awakenings and my own consciousness raising has been from conflict, from people, for disagreeing with people and saying, no, I think this, why do you think that? And that's helped me grow as well.
How are you creating that space?
Probably too much. I need to slow down. But not being, because it'd be really easy just to talk to friends, people you know who want to say everything you want to say, but just really spending time talking to people or groups or folks that you might not think you agree with, but, and I think it's just a nerd in me. I'm just really interested in how and why do you see this way? And even if we can't get to a point of agreement, at least I want to understand kind of what's the best class I took in college was a negotiation class, and talked about the difference between interests and positions. So I think getting to creating spaces or having conversations where it's not about kind of the position, but what's the values underlying the position, and just using that because it helps informs. Okay, well maybe we could tweak it this way, or maybe we did it this way, or maybe if we talk to this person, it could work like that. But every Tuesday we have that space. It's called a council meeting, and there's a part at the end called public comment. You guys will laugh because you don't have to chair it. And that's a place of much conflict. Some about reality and some not, but it's a place of much conflict. So that space has been created by democracy.
Yeah, got it. Thank you. Share a little bit about, you were telling me you were ready for this job, but there's a lot of physical demands. That's been an interesting awareness that you have. How do you stay or recharge and stay invigorated to do this work?
So confession, I do need hobbies. I'm not gonna lie. I don't have much hobbies. I'm gonna start bike riding. I think that might be my thing. So I recharge oftentimes, like if I'm back in the classroom and I'm talking to like a 9th grader who doesn't care I'm the mayor, who's like, what shoes is, like just like stuff like that. And then I'm asking them, like, what do you want to do? What do you want to be? How do you see the community? What it's like? And just hearing that's very recharging because there's so much hope there. So I think most of my recharge is talking to people, but I also have a political context where it's just like if I'm it doesn't work anymore. I used to be able to have a costume, like a hoodie and some sweats, and no one would recognize me when I was on city council. But now it doesn't work as well. So I maybe add a hat or something. But just seeing like in the barbershop and just hearing how people are engaging and thinking, that's recharging. I don't do it enough, but when I open my Bible, that's a good recharge. And then spending time with my family and friends, and laughing a lot. So it sounds whack. I know I need hobbies. I told you that too.
You're gonna get the bike, so that'll be good.
What's your hobby?
Yoga.
Really?
Yeah. We'll go to hot yoga together.
My wife is she could be a yogi probably, but she does. I did it once with her.
We don't
but
want to do
was-
it with her because
yeah,
we're not
yeah,
that
it was
good. We'll just
competitive,
go.
and she was anyway.
We'll just go. I want to let you know that we're getting ready to take questions soon. So if you can go to the back to the mics, colleague in the back waving her hand, she'll be ready to start filling your questions shortly. You know, when we got to work together in Stockton, there was this tagline, Reinvent Stockton. Can you share a little bit about what that means? Kind of like how we entered that work, talking about the zones, really like opportunity zones down there. And is that still the same vision that you have, or has it expanded?
Yeah, so me and Miss Dr. McAfee met in 2014 as a council member. And we were working on a collective impact strategy for my council district, using kind of the whole Promise Neighborhoods and Promise Zone thing as a convening point for the city. So that work is still ongoing, actually. It's been, we've gotten a lot of love from HUD this year, which is, I love it. Yay, keep it coming.
That's right.
Let's be friends. And so we had a convening where we had 10 federal agencies. They all want to be a part, but part of it was the deep relationships between, so it's exciting to me, so bear with me. It's going to sound boring to you guys. We have like the school board represented. We have public health. We have the sheriff's office. We have the police department. We have neighborhood activists. We have community-based organizations. We have city government. We have some of the private sector. We have like everyone just organized about what can we do collectively to really move the needle forward, and how do we hold ourselves accountable to indicators. But what was interesting is that it was very frustrating because we spent 2 years in meetings about not about meetings, but sometimes the meetings were about the meetings we need to have to pick the indicators so we can meet about the indicators when we met again. But now that that work is done, it's been very easy to organize and mobilize resources because it's a plan that's ambitious, that's rooted in, again, investing in people and in communities. So part of the reason why I ran for mayor was that in public comment sections during council meetings, folks would like berate me for only caring about South Stockton, for doing my job.
Right.
So at first I would get frustrated, but then I put on my empathy hat and I listened, like, what's the interest behind this position of being upset that the council member is doing his job for his council district? And what I found was that it was just saying that, hey, this is not the only part of the city that needs attention, love, or energy, or leadership. So based off those comments, I said, you know what, maybe I should run for mayor and bring that same level of attention and focus and collaboration to a lot of the issues facing other parts of the city and the city as a whole. So that work, Reinvent South Stockton work, is still happening and ongoing, and maybe it's doing better because I'm not so involved anymore because I'm busier, because they've been moving well. I'm like, what was this when I was like on the meeting?
Yeah.
So it's probably me, actually.
Yeah.
But now we're looking at emulating that same approach and supports to the 4 other focus areas in the city, and also thinking through in terms of the economic development strategy and things of that sort. How do we kind of repackage and let people know that Stockton's not some backwards, bankrupt, violent city, that it's a vibrant city. It is the 12th largest in the state. It's the 62nd largest in this country. It has 315 resilient, bright, ambitious people. And we were at rock bottom, but through relationship building, trust, and a real focus on outcomes, we're slowly moving our way up towards the top.
Perfect. Thank you. Good job. Good job, Let's take some questions.
A lot of questions.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Sasha Williams. I'm a 16-year-old junior at Carondelet High School from the East Bay, so thank you. My question was, what advice would you give young kids my age who are about to, go through the process of applying for colleges and getting ready to head into the real world? What advice would you give them who want to make a difference and a change in their communities through things that they're passionate about?
All right. So college is Disneyland. College is not the real world, so love it. It's so much fun, but it's not the real world. Seriously, but it's great. And I would say there's like a scripture that says, don't despise small beginnings. And I think of all the stuff I'm doing now, I started when I was 15, 16. So in high school, I was like chair of the Youth Advisory Commission. And that was like the most important job in the world to me. So I would sit down and make my agenda and meet with Parks and Rec, like really like I'm doing now, and meet with Parks and Rec staff and call up, make sure I had the support needed. I mean, run those meetings. And before, my friends were like, why are you so serious about that? And the scale is different, but the same skills are the same. I remember I was a weird 16-year-old, so I secretly read Robert's Rules of Order. Because I didn't want my meetings to be ran tight, you know? And if I needed to do something quickly, I wanted to, anyway. But I think that level of seriousness kind of prepared so everything wasn't new when I got here. And then even in college, I had a lot of fun, but I also realized that college was such a great opportunity. And it's like 4 years, you're with your best friends or some of your best friends, you're with some of the smartest people in your age in the world, you're in a place where everything's a yes. And I felt that, okay, what can I do with this? What can I do? So we started nonprofits, we ran conferences, we rallied and protested, we partied, we had a good time, but it was always taking every opportunity to learn skills, because you don't know, like if you had told me at 16 I would be mayor, I'd be like, there's no, why would I do that? Was what I would have said. If you had told me at 18 I would be mayor, I'd be like, no, I'm gonna be at Google. But if you told me at 21 when I was running for city council I would be mayor, I'd be like, I might do a cool 4 years and try something else. But it's all those experiences, I learned skills that made so whatever opportunity presented itself, I was ready. So I'm not even sure if I answered your question succinctly, but basically, did I? Okay,
You're good.
perfect.
Thank
Good
you.
luck.
Good luck.
Thank you, Honorable Mayor. The experience you addressed is a testimony that race is not and shall not be an obstacle. That's understood from the experience that I learned. I want to get back to the role of mayor. What are the major infrastructure problems in Scotland area that you're familiar with? And what is the role of mayor and the city council?
You trying to get a deal? No. So I think, and maybe I presented it wrong. So I think we could get to a place in this country where race is not an obstacle. But I do believe, and I think the data shows that it is. It's not necessarily destiny, but there are reasons why the outcomes look the way they do. So I don't want my story to be misconstrued as saying that race is not an issue in this country anymore. I think I was suggesting the opposite, actually. But in terms of infrastructure projects, a lot of the big ones were built right before the bankruptcy. So we have like a $230 billion Delta water supply project that the council approved about 8 years ago. The marina, the arena. So a lot of things that 10 years from now will be good, but in 2012 probably weren't so good for our bottom line. So we don't have any major infrastructure projects in the works now besides the ongoing work of the water supply project. And then we're moving City Hall, but we're not building a new one. So it'd be like some annexes and things that'll be built. So there's no major infrastructure projects except at the port where they're bringing in, hopefully, this data center that uses, I'm gonna butcher it. It's cool though, they use water as a cooling thing for the data center, but that would help kind of with a fiber optic network. So I think our next big, I shouldn't say this, I don't think, and I have no bearing on this, but I could see a scenario where there's a big project around the fiber optic network in Stockton and kind of leveraging that for economic development. But I have no role in that. I'm just literally, because people get in trouble, I'm just thinking out loud, but I can see that as the next frontier.
Hi, my name's Dave. Grew up in Stockton, so it's very exciting to see you here. We've been hearing great things about you, and you have not disappointed. I just wanted to ask about how you think about the trade-offs with the Swenson Park development project. And as someone who grew up playing golf at that course, and someone who played soccer as a kid in the far too few parks we have, we're trading off public park space in a city that doesn't have nearly enough of it for more housing, which is valid and necessary. But how do you measure those? How do you think about those trade-offs?
No, thank you for that. It's been a lot of time this month thinking about those trade-offs. But I think there's a couple of things, right? Like I in listening and meeting with people, I didn't really know that green space was such a value that many in the community held. So that's been very encouraging to hear, and I think that's a good thing. And that's why last week, I announced that we're putting out actually an RFP for someone to operate as a golf course or a green space. So there wouldn't be housing. But I would also say I don't agree with the golf course being called a park, and that a park I can go to, a golf course I can't unless I pay and have clubs. And part of the issue, part of the issue has been we're a city that closed libraries, swimming pools, took away people's health care, restructured $500 million in debt. But somehow during that same time, the subsidy for 2 golf courses went up every year. So we started at $200,000, and now this last year, $750,000 for 2 golf courses. And the issue is that we don't feel it now, but in 2022, our pension obligation bonds are due. Every single penny in that general fund will matter. It will mean some sort of trade-off. But the other thing is that there's 6 to 8 public golf courses in the vicinity, and our golf courses aren't necessarily that much cheaper than the other ones. And it's been really frustrating, I think, for me, because a lot of the people who are stringent about keeping the golf course subsidy are the first people to talk about no government subsidies, let's be fiscally conservative, let's look at every penny and make sure it counts, and that government shouldn't compete with private enterprise. So we have Stocktonians operating golf courses, competing against 2 city golf courses that have about $300,000 to $400,000 subsidy each to make them break even. So that's part of it. I think the idea with housing wasn't my idea. It came from a report commissioned by the city manager in response to just questions I had about the subsidy. But I think that's also been interesting as well, because so much of the dialogue has been about no low-income housing on the golf course, which is a dog whistle in my opinion, because no one ever mentioned low-income housing. In fact, the proposals that were public documents had housing that was probably even a little bit above Stockton's market value. But I think it's also been a very interesting, I'll stop talking after this, but I think it's also been a very interesting discussion just around what do we value as a community, because the same meeting we talked about the golf courses, the item before that was about the 62 parks we have, and how given our budget situation and some of the tough fiscal times we're in, that the maintenance contract went up $500,000 to take care of 62 green spaces that are truly open parks, because they're parks. And we said we couldn't find money for that, but in the next breath, we couldn't even have a conversation about $850,000 for 2 golf courses, which are, and then the last thing, because I spent 3 years researching this, the last thing is that the city's been having this conversation since 2010. So if you read the report, and I was in college, but if you read the report from 2010, the report in 2018, the situation has only gotten worse, and I think it's because people have been afraid to have the conversation. So I say all that to say I hope that when we put this RFP out, someone will come and say they can operate the golf course as a golf course with no city subsidies and money and pay for the millions of dollars of capital improvements, because that'd be a big win. But the last thing is that it's not even about 1 golf course, it's about 2. And that's also been very frustrating to me, because there's another golf course, Van Busker, in the southern part of the city, which doesn't have as actively political people, but they still are inherently as important as people anywhere else in the city. And no one's talking about what to do with that golf course. They're saying give away that golf course to keep our golf course. And it's not even anyone's golf course, it's the city's golf course that we all pitch into. So that's been frustrating, but it's also been a great leadership and learning lesson. And I've actually been to driving ranges so I could empathize more and let people know. No, because I don't want. No, and I play. I'm like, this is beautiful. This is fun. I get it. This is like you got foxes. This is cool.
Yeah.
So I've been thankful for that opportunity, and to also just hear that people. And I think the biggest lesson from that has been that even whether it's true or not, if people believe that a decision has been made before they've had their input, there could be intense backlash. So that's been also a great learning experience, and I'm glad we did that in year 1 and not a couple years later.
Cool. Let's see if we can get a couple more in.
I'll be short. I'm sorry.
That's all right. No, this is fine.
But no, because I never get a chance to explain myself about golf. So I want.
We're gonna take these last 5 as long as everybody keeps them short.
All right.
And then
It's not their fault. It's mine. I'll be short.
Hi, can you just, my name is Phil, I live here in San Francisco. Can you describe your approach to the marijuana industry, which I understand you're thinking in terms of getting revenues by licensing and taxing and improving the economic development in the city as part of that?
Yeah, I think for me, I'm not. So again, at first I thought, I was like, dispensaries are probably gonna be like liquor stores, and I don't want a dispensary on every corner, and I still don't, although I do understand there's more security and things of that sort. So I'm like, okay, it's not quite a liquor store. But I'm very excited about manufacturing, distribution, testing, and all the jobs and economic development that could come from that. But it's because of the way we have to govern. My council has decided it'd be smart to, don't necessarily completely disagree, but it's smart to take the first quarter of this year to look and see what other cities are doing, and what those impacts are. And I didn't push too hard back on that because although I did say that if it's new for everyone, how do we know what I was like, well, we think other people are better apt to handle this problem, why don't we bring those people here to handle the problem or the opportunity here? So we're gonna spend 4 months researching and learning, and I think I'm really interested in figuring out how do we make it so the economic development benefits are broadly shared, and especially given just how much it costs to permit and license and all the restrictions we're putting on people getting into the business. How do we make sure that folks that have been the most impacted at least have some opportunity to share in the benefits, which is easier said than done. And I'm shorter. I'm done.
Hi, I'm Danielle Dye with the City of Oakland. I found it really powerful when you said to invest in people and not infrastructure. So I work primarily on infrastructure and transportation. And I've been thinking more about how we can make better connections with housing, especially with our homelessness crisis. So,
I didn't say don't invest in infrastructure. What I said was investing in people is the best investment, but infrastructure is a close second.
But my question is if you can speak more to investing in people and how sometimes, all of our grant funding is really all about, something sexy, something new, innovative, but at the same time we have issues with just maintenance. So if you can speak to how can we continue to invest in people with kind of more of the infrastructure money?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'm trying to be short, so so talk to me after if I don't give you a good answer, because I hate when I ask questions and people don't answer. It's a pet peeve. So, well, and actually, Dr. McAfee, he has like a whole toolkit about this. I was looking at it 2 weeks ago, actually, the All in Cities Infrastructure Toolkit. So based on this toolkit, the idea is that if there's a way to plug people into the jobs or the contracts or the money being spent, so it's not just the same people who get the contracts and the same people get to work on the projects, I think that's a big way. I think if this is just without a lot of deliberation, but if there's a way to connect sort of the things happening in schools to such investments, so whether it's kids as interns or apprenticeships or just learning what's it like to be a foreman, what's it like to work on a project, I think that'd be awesome. And then ensuring that the infrastructure investment doesn't go through communities like freeways, just make sure they don't harm people. I think actually just not harming people with infrastructure would be a great step, and then just ensuring that folks are able to participate in, because we do need a lot of infrastructure upgrades from our roads to our public transit systems, et cetera. And so I think also making sure we invest in infrastructure that sometimes the most marginal folks use, so things like the bus service, for example, and make sure we invest in those things too.
Hey, Mayor Tubbs. My name is Kareem. Big fan. Been a big fan for a while. Really love what you do. You're a pretty passionate guy, and I love that. Big inspiration. Wanted to say that. But also, I know that you have a lot of plans for Stockton, and you really want to bring the economic development of the Bay Area and the South Bay, North Bay, and San Francisco to Stockton. I know Stockton's far away. I know you have a lot of plans. You said invest in people. invest in infrastructure, meaning like fiber optic cable and bringing those Silicon Valley jobs over to Stockton. What's kind of, I mean, I guess that's your vision, but what's kind of like your broader plan for that? I know you've mentioned certain things, but I would love to just hear a little bit more.
Here we go. Try to be short.
I'm ready for the answer.
So part of it is doing stuff like this. Part of it is that we're also, and I know some people don't like this frame, but there's some merit to it in my opinion. So we're working with UOP, in our school districts, and this group called Valley Vision around this idea of kind of the skills gap, because the Stockton's a very interesting position because of the 14 mega regions or something. We're 14 out of 15 in terms of quote unquote human capital, while San Francisco mega region is like number 1, and Sacramento, which also borders us, is like number 3. So we're in the middle of these 2 high skill places that also have some economic things. So we spending a lot of time with investing in people, literally mean investing like in education and training and opportunity so folks are equipped to handle the jobs that exist. But what's interesting and almost paradoxical is that there's still 50,000 people that commute from San Joaquin County to the Bay Area to do something. So I'm like, someone has skills, right? So I haven't yet cracked that nut yet, but it's really saying that, hey, that may not make sense to move everything here. And it may not make sense to move a headquarters, but there's some parts of your organization that might make more sense to be in Stockton, especially because we have a port, especially because we're so close to Sacramento, but also close to the Bay Area, especially because there are some public transit options. So really having that conversation, like where are these people going, where are they working, what makes sense to place here. And then number 3, I also, being a nerd, there's a study from the U.S. Small Business Association that talks about how I think 63% of jobs are created not by big corporations, but by small businesses and mom and pops. So when investing in people, we've also been spending a lot of time with entrepreneurs and folks like that in the community, or bringing people into entrepreneurship by having workshops and classes and incubators and things of that sort, but also making sure they know that City Hall is friendly to them. We want to see them expand. We want to make sure they're licensed. We want to make sure everything's health and safety, but our regulations aren't to be burdensome, but to make sure they're really fully a part of our economy. So entrepreneurship, skills gap development, and talking a lot is kind of the 3 prongs of the strategy.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
This will be our last audience question.
Hi, I'm Stephen Buss with Mission YIMBY. I spend a lot of time thinking and organizing around housing security, housing equity, and economic security. So I love universal basic income, and I'm super excited that you're doing a trial in Stockton. So I was wondering what you and your task force learned about the effect of UBI and those 3 things: housing security, housing equity, and economic security.
Suki, you want to answer this? So I have the main people here who. So if I mess up, just text me and I'll fix it. So and part of the excitement around the demonstration is that there's not a lot of evidence in terms of the American context, but what they found in studying the Alaskan permanent dividend and also some native communities in, I think, Finland. Do they have results yet? So those 2 was that there was the biggest impacts they measured was that there was no like people didn't become less productive, like people didn't stop working. And then I forgot which trial it was that was longer, but it showed things like better health outcomes, better educational attainment for children. But I'm not sure in terms of, you said housing.
Yeah, housing equity, housing security, and economic security.
Yeah. So I don't think there was I didn't remember reading anything about housing equity and housing security, but it seems like it would be a safe inference that money helped stabilize so folks weren't moving as much, but I'm not sure what the data says about that. And then about economic security, I think those positive outcomes kind of point to the fact that when folks are stabilized and there was also something I was reading about the impact of the earned income tax credit and how that also has been very helpful. I just can't pull the stats like that, but to answer your question, it showed good things and not bad.
Very nice. I like that. So, Mayor, before we close, your 60-second plug for your big idea to change the world.
And maybe I'm becoming a real politician because I feel like I've said this 7 times already, but I really do think that my big idea to change the world, well, one starts with my fundamental premise, and one just builds upon it. And it's really, well, 3 things. I think number one, just a real recognition that literally every human being on this earth has inherent value and equal value. Number 2, the idea that trust me, talent and intellect are so ubiquitous and so universal. And you might actually find in many respects more talent in places where folks have less opportunity because they have to work kind of harder sometimes. But resources and opportunities are not. And then number 3, I truly do believe that the smartest investment we can make, at least as the government, are in people, especially because we don't know what 50 years from now will be. We don't know what 100 years from now will be. We'll know there will be people, and some of those people will be alive now, and the way we invest in them and support them now really determines our future. Whether there's robots and AI, we can't really, there's some futurists who probably actually know. But for lay people like us, we don't know, but what we do know is what we have in front of us, and investing in people that have all the skills and opportunities so they can make the right choices will change the world.
Thank you. Mayor said you were a scholar and a gentleman, and you demonstrated that tonight, so thank you.
Thank you.
Will you join me?
Appreciate you, brother.
Good job. That's it. Thank you all.